All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm wearing number 143. Today is the 143rd day of the war and 143rd day of hostages in Gaza. And well, we're not going to talk about that today. What I wanted to talk about today is the decision last week by Alabama's Supreme Court to which determined that embryos, that is, embryos that are that female eggs that are fertilized by sperm in glass tubes, that's what in vitro means, in glass, in the hospital, in a lab, those which then become embryos are considered children. That is, their human life already. So I wanted to talk about that and say how absurd that claim is, not just from a Jewish perspective, but from a scientific perspective, and look at a teshuvah, a Jewish legal decision from the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards that was published in December 1995 about this very topic. And then I want to look at an article, thanks to Barry Polisar, who shared this with me, just about the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, his perspective, and how it is an ever-growing perspective among Christians in America as to what the nature of America is supposed to be. That is America a democracy for all, or is America supposed to be a Christian government? Okay, so it all relates to this topic. So first of all, I want to share my screen, and because the teshuvah gets into the science. This teshuvah was published in a collection of teshuvot. I'm looking on my shelf. Just one second here, because I thought I had it there. Oh, here it is. Okay. Yes. So the proceedings of the Committee on the Jewish Laws and Standards published teshuvot that were from 1986 to 1990. And then there's another one, before that, 1980 to 1985. So I bought these books, but now they're all available digitally on the Rabbinical Assembly website. So there's no reason to have these books anymore. But there had been one or two published since then, from 1990 until a few years later. And this paper is copied from the book that published these papers. Okay? The author of this paper is a rabbi, Aaron Mackler. We overlapped at the seminary. He was ordained a year or two before me, and he works as a medical ethicist at Duquesne Hospital in Pittsburgh. So he comes by this information and this material naturally, because this was his area of expertise. He did work for a couple of years as an assistant rabbi at B'nai Israel in Rockville, but then moved to Pittsburgh and worked and has been there ever since. So this paper, published in December 1995, was voted in basically unanimously. There was just one abstention. Who knows why there was an abstention to it? Everybody was in favor because there's no denying the science, and there's no denying the halachic perspective about this. So the question that he was answering here is, may an infertile couple utilize IVF, in vitro fertilization, to have a child? What is the status of that offspring? Does halacha provide any guidance regarding the transfer of embryos to the woman's uterus for gestation? May more embryos be created by IVF than are needed for immediate use? What may be done with extra embryos, including those that are cryopreserved? And is IVF using donated sperm and or ova permitted? What is the status of the offspring? Okay, so this is like an all-encompassing 25-page paper about all aspects of IVF. So we're not going to look at all aspects of it. I just want to look at the beginning. So where he defines for us so that we all know what we're talking about here. In vitro fertilization involves the fertilization of an ovum outside the body. In vitro, literally meaning in glass, refers to the Petri dish in which sperm and ova are combined. In the first successful use of IVF as a reproductive technology, British researchers Robert Edwards and Patrick Steptoe fertilized an ovum produced by Leslie Brown with sperm produced by her husband and transferred the fertilized ovum to her uterus, leading to the birth of Louise Brown in July 1978. Okay, so this is a 56-year-old process that has proven to be wildly successful, but yet very, very painful, physically and emotionally, for the woman and for the couple, assuming that it's a married couple that is going through the process together. There are single women who later in life, haven't gotten married yet, want to go through this process too. But anyway, it is a lengthy, expensive, and difficult, challenging process still today. There is a podcast. I don't listen to too many podcasts, if any, but there's one called Serial, and I think Serial did a podcast about Yale University Hospital in New Haven and their fertility clinic, and the abuses in that clinic of that is the doctors. There's a nurse who was stealing fentanyl, which is used as a pain reliever, and used in the right way, it's not addictive. But this nurse in the clinic was stealing fentanyl and giving instead saline solution to women who are undergoing the retrieval of the eggs from their body. And all these women are complaining about the incredible pain in that process. There's not supposed to be any pain at all because they're given pain relief. But in this particular clinic, there was an abuse of that. Okay, so Perry in the chat just shared comments in the editorial section of the Post yesterday about how absurd the opinion was. I don't really read letters to the editor, Perry. I do that for my own sanity. And I especially don't read comments to posts that are on social media as for the same reason. I don't have the patience to read other people's opinions. And whether they're intelligent opinions or not, I just don't do that. So I'm just saying. So I'm sure there were tons of opinions about this. And I think a major issue in society today, especially among teenagers, is how much they read comments on social media and how much it affects their mental health. So for my own mental health, I do not read comments, and I would highly encourage everyone not to read comments on social media. They're not filtered. It's bad for your health. It really is. And there should be a teshuvah about that too. Really,
That was
Yeah, go
To
ahead, Jeff.
clarify, it was the Washington Post, in the editorial page.
I understand that. Even
Yeah.
those letters to the editor, which are edited, maybe there are 10 of them or something like that. Even those I don't read. Every now and then I'll take a look to see if I know somebody who has written a letter. I'll read that letter, but otherwise I just don't bother. I don't. Anyway, so I tangent, and so this. Yes, and I was going off on a tangent about the Serial podcast about just for this sense that it is painful to a woman, it's expensive to a woman. Not all states, I think Massachusetts covers IVF treatment as part of your health insurance plan, but not all states do that. So it is hard. It is emotionally hard for a woman or a couple that is infertile, whether it's the woman, whether it's a medical issue with the woman, a medical issue with the man, or whatever other reason it is, a couple is infertile. That couple has to be in the correct state of the union in order to get as much health care coverage for this. And then to have the Supreme Court of the state of Alabama to say that it's not permitted anymore because the accidental destruction of such an embryo would be considered murder because the embryo was a child. So let's go on here. As typically practiced today, this is in 1995, a woman preparing for IVF receives hormones to stimulate the development of several ova. Shortly before ovulation would occur, a physician uses ultrasound to guide a needle through the cervix to the ovaries to gather or retrieve developed ova. Right? It's that needle through the cervix that is a painful process. After inspection and appropriate preparation, the ova are combined, and also the hormones also wreak havoc with your system as well. And some women can have a terrible reaction to that hormone treatment, and so it just does. It's just a terrible process. Um, After inspection and appropriate preparation, the ova are combined with prepared sperm. The resulting embryo that's just the technical name for what that fertilized egg is allowed to develop for a time period of up to a few days, reaching the stage of 2 to 8 cells, and is then transferred to a woman's uterus using a catheter inserted through the cervix. Okay, so when the procedure is successful, the embryo continues to develop and implants in the uterus, leading to pregnancy and the birth of a child. At the 2 to 8 cell stage, the embryo could be cryopreserved or frozen for a transfer at a later time. All right, okay, so that's how it works. An embryo is inserted into the uterus, and then you hope that it attaches and grows. Now, in vitro fertilization was originally developed to assist women with damaged or absent fallopian tubes. The fallopian tube connecting the ovary and uterus is typically the site of fertilization, as well as the path by which the fertilized ovum reaches the uterus. IVF has also been used in response to other female infertility factors, such as endometriosis or ovulatory problems, for male factors, and for unexplained infertility. Okay, so in 1993, the Society for Assisted Reproductive Technology and the American Society for Reproductive Medicine reported that IVF and related procedures were performed for 50,844 cycles, leading to 8,741 deliveries. That's 1993. I'm sure it's exponentially larger now. The most common procedure, IVF using the recipient's ova and without embryo freezing, led to delivery of a child following 18.6% of egg retrievals. He's just saying what the percentage of success for this is. That's in 1995. The success rate is that much better, but here's the challenge now. Yeah, what I wanted to say. We'll get to this page in a moment. So what he points out as this article goes on is that what we're dealing with are cells that have the potential to become human life. The embryo, as it is, it has to be used soon after retrieval and fertilization. It has to then be reimplanted soon because it can, at room temperature or even kept cold, it only stays for a certain amount of time. It has to be used within a few days, or it has to then be flash frozen and be kept for a longer time. Okay, so and when embryos are implanted, one is never implanted. It's at least three that are implanted to ensure success. My wife has a very good friend, the oldest friend from when they were 5 years old. She has two sets of twins, and the first set of twins were originally triplets, but the third one, and both of these twins were a result of IVF. The first set of twins, girls, the triplet died in utero. Okay, and that's common for what happens with IVF treatment. So not only does the couple have to find the money if health insurance doesn't pay for it. So there's that stress. There's the stress medically of going through the process. There's the stress then of being implanted and then hoping that the embryo will stick. And then knowing that possibly you're going to be giving birth to twins or triplets. So the pregnancy itself is more threatening to the mother than just a single embryo and fetus growing, right? Multiple fetus pregnancy makes the pregnancy itself high risk. Okay, so and that leads to added stress, physical and emotional stress for the mother as well as for the partner. Okay, so I'm just highlighting what is going through here. But the science is clear and Jewish law is clear. That embryo has the potential for human life, but it is not human life because that embryo cannot exist on its own. The embryo only works and develops if it's in utero attached to the uterine wall. If it's not, it's just fertilized egg. That's all it is. Somebody, a friend posted on Facebook, somebody went to a bakery to order a cake and received dough, actual cake dough in as cake. And the person said, "This isn't cake." And the baker said, "Yes, it is. You just have to put it in the oven, but it's still cake." So that to make a joke about this very serious idea. The embryo is not a child. It is by no means a child. And just because it has the potential to be a child doesn't mean that it is a child. Now, that doesn't mean also that we disrespect these embryos and just treat it as any other cell that you might be examining under the microscope in a laboratory. That is clear from Rabbi Mackler's Teshuvah as well. We know because it has the potential, it should be treated as such. But I want to share this. Freezing embryos with the possibility of future transfer and maintaining them in the frozen state also appeared to be consistent with any obligations concerning appropriate treatment of the embryos. Other options for frozen or newly created embryos are more problematic. That is, thawing a frozen embryo without transferring it so that the embryo dies, using the embryo for scientific research, and donating the embryo for use by another. So that's a question, what to do with these embryos that the mother doesn't need, right, because the embryos that were implanted were successful, and having one or two children is all the mother wanted, so she has extra embryos. What are you going to do? Some halachic authorities have ruled that in vitro embryos, at least those that are not intended to be transferred, have no significant halachic status and may be discarded. Let me say that again. Some halachic authorities, at least those that have ruled that in vitro embryos, those not intended to be transferred into a human being, have no significant halachic status and may be discarded. Rabbi Chaim David Halevi, he is a noted Sephardi halachic authority, holds that all ova that are fertilized in vitro do not have the legal status of an embryo. One does not violate the Sabbath on their behalf. In other words, if an embryo is implanted in a woman's body and therefore becomes a fetus, something's wrong with the mother during pregnancy. You violate Shabbat in order to save her life. This embryo is, because it's nothing should be done for it if there's a problem with that embryo. And it's permissible to discard them if they were not chosen for transfer, since the law of abortion only applies to an embryo in the womb. In vitro, there is no prohibition whatsoever. So it's not even in the status. We talked a couple weeks ago about abortion and whether abortion is permitted according to Jewish law or not. So because it's not in the womb, it's not the status of a fetus, which still also is not life yet. A fetus becomes human once the fetus is born. So there's embryo, there's egg, and there's sperm. Together become fertilized, becomes an embryo. Embryo becomes viable only when implanted into the womb. And if the pregnancy sticks, that embryo becomes a fetus. Okay, so that's in layman's terms, in more ways than one, explaining the science here of what's going on. So that's why the embryo outside of the human body in vitro is not anything. It's not anything. It's certainly not a child. Okay, so in 1995, I just want to read what his conclusions are, because we don't need to read the rest of the Teshuvah. His conclusions, he has 8 halachic conclusions to make about the questions that the Teshuvah began with. So, 1, an infertile couple may utilize IVF using the husband's sperm and wife's egg to have a child. They are under no obligation to do so. Before undergoing IVF procedures, the couple should consider medical risks as well as the personal and psychological toll that IVF often entails. A child, okay, so in other words, the mitzvah is pru urvu. That's the first chronologically in the Torah of the 613 commandments, to be fruitful and multiply. A lot of couples who take mitzvahs seriously want to do as much as humanly possible to fulfill the mitzvah of be fertile and to be fruitful and multiply. So that would mean undergoing the pain, physical and emotional, of IVF to do this. He's saying you don't have to do that. You shouldn't have to undergo pain in order to fulfill the mitzvah. But if you want to, then you can. And a child born as a result of such an IVF procedure is fully the parent's child in all respects and causes the mitzvah of be fruitful and multiply to be filled, right? So just because the pregnancy didn't happen in the normal, natural way, it's still the father's sperm and the mother's egg being implanted into the mother, and therefore it's their child. Couples who wish to use IVF and pre-implantation genetic testing to avoid having a child with a severe genetic disease may do so. So this is what is becoming more common today. There are many people who have the couple together know that pregnancy weighs the risk, carries the risk of carrying forward some kind of genetic disease to the child. So I know. So my son-in-law's sister's husband is from a family that has an unusual physical defect, and their first child had such a defect. Okay, so he was born without ears and needed several operations to get ears, the physical ears, and also to have cochlear implants so that he can hear. Okay, the next time they became pregnant, which was a year ago, they went through IVF and only selected the embryos that did not have that genetic predisposition to be implanted in her. Okay, so that's an example from real life, from my extended family. There are other people I know of that also that have undergone this procedure in order for some other genetic disease, an intellectual disability disease, or something like that. There are even some who might choose an embryo that will be either a boy or a girl. So not because of any genetic disease that you want to avoid. It's just because you want to have a boy or a girl. So he says, because of just cells, it's okay to do that. So all those the other things about genetic diseases that you want to avoid, that makes sense. And you could throw away that embryo that carries that genetic disease in it because it's just cells. It's just cells. Okay. So IVF should not be used solely for the purpose of gender selection. This is 1995, and this is Rabbi Mackler's decision. But everybody on the law committee agreed with him. So to do IVF and then do gender selection from it, that's showing disrespect to the potential human life. And what Mackler is suggesting in this teshuva is that we shouldn't treat the embryos, as just cells. You should treat it with a little bit more respect, and selecting because of selecting an embryo because it's going to be a girl or boy, you shouldn't really do that. But there are people who do it, and I would say that from this teshuva, there's nothing really to stop them from doing that. So it is also about the amount of embryos to implant. He says, number 4, in order to avoid risks to the mother and child and decrease the likelihood of abortion, no more than 3 embryos should be transferred in an IVF procedure. And so in other words, more than 3 implanted raise the risk that something's going to go wrong with one or more of those fetuses during pregnancy, which might mean that after the first trimester, one might have to be aborted in order to save the other 2. So you don't want to get into that kind of situation ahead of time. So limiting it to 3 makes sense for a variety of reasons. To the extent possible, transferring only 2 embryos would be preferable. But again, so that would have to be up to the fertility clinic today and the couple to decide what they think is best for them. Okay. Now he's also saying here, well, no, that's enough for now, because the rest of this is about what about a couple where the husband's sperm is not viable to fertilize the egg? There's something wrong with the sperm. So can you use another sperm donor with the mother's egg, or vice versa? The father's sperm is fine, but the mother's eggs are not viable. Can he take somebody else's eggs? So what he's saying is it's the host who is um, who is going through the pregnancy that determines the religion of the child. So somebody else's, if, so you have X and Y as the parents. You have Z donating one of the factors into the embryo. The child, the baby implanted into X, the mother, that baby becomes X and Y's baby, and that baby is Jewish, if X is Jewish. If the mother is Jewish, the embryo implanted in her becomes Jewish just through the process of implementation and implantation, implantation and pregnancy. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share about this article. So that explains the science and explains how embryos are cells and not life itself, and that the statement by the the Supreme Court of Alabama is a dangerous statement, um, where law then becomes the factor in determining law for the Supreme Court of Alabama was religion and not science. And that's a dangerous precedent to set in the United States, because we would imagine, certainly George Washington, as when he was inaugurated as first president of the United States, received a congratulatory letter combined from all the 6 synagogues in America at the time. And he, in response to that letter, said to religion, no sanction, to right, that freedom of religion and its freedom of religion is also enshrined in the Constitution or in the Bill of Rights, right? So then when a court chooses one religion and one religious perspective in order to determine a legal decision that threatens the Constitution and the law itself, and that the law then becomes the law of a particular religion as opposed to the law for all Americans. That's the threat, and that is what Heather Cox Richardson, a historian, wrote on her what's called a Substack, her uh, her articles. So Heather Cox Richardson, so Barry Polisar sent this to me. Heather Cox Richardson is a historian and scholar who is on the faculty of Boston College. So she's a real person at a real university, happens to be a Catholic university, but it is a university nonetheless. And I want to share my screen about what she has to say about this. So this was published on February 22nd. So her Substack is called Letters from an American. So if you're interested, Substack is the same thing that Barry Weiss writes on something called the Free Press. That's a Substack. And Daniel Gordis, who I refer to as Israel from the Inside, his is a Substack also. It's just it's how to monetize your blog, if you understand that English. Okay, so you don't have to subscribe to read this. Letters from an American is what she writes frequently. So the Alabama Supreme Court decided that cells awaiting implantation for in vitro fertilization are children, and that the accidental destruction of such an embryo falls under the state's wrongful death of a minor act. Okay, in an opinion concurring with the ruling, Chief Justice Tom Parker declared, Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court declared that the people of Alabama have adopted the theologically based view of the sanctity of life and said that human life cannot be wrongfully destroyed without incurring the wrath of a holy God. Okay, so that's pretty scary, which then led the University of Alabama at Birmingham, their fertility clinic, to immediately stop all procedures because they would be under threat if they discarded any embryos of murder. And why would they want to subject themselves to lawsuits? So that makes sense. But what's awful as a result of this is all the women in Alabama now who have fertility issues will not be able to go through IVF for the time being. And unless they can afford it, they'll have to stay infertile unless they can afford to move to some other state and live there long enough to get health insurance in that state to cover IVF. So you see, it's a domino effect, a ripple effect on society, and it's the poor who are affected the most by this, and it's also non-Christians who are affected most by this as well. So if his concurring statements, that's the statement that he published to go with the opinion of the Supreme Court on February 16th, if that written opinion that's written now for posterity in the Alabama Supreme Court was not enough, he said in an interview on a podcast the same day that in Parker, that's the Chief Justice of Alabama Supreme Court, claimed that God created government and called it heartbreaking that we have let it go into the possession of others. So not only does the Chief Justice say that law needs to reflect the law of God, which is Christian law, that's his interpretation of Christian law, but he says government, the American government, should reflect Christian religion as well. And this one more paragraph, Parker, this Supreme Court justice, the Chief Justice, referred to something called the Seven Mountain Mandate, which I had never heard of before, a theory that appeared in 1975, which claims that Christians must take over the seven mountains of U.S. life. That is, religion, family, education, media, entertainment, business, and government. He told his interviewer that we've abandoned those seven mountains and they've been occupied by the other side. God is calling and equipping people to step back into these mountains right now. Okay, so this is not something then that just the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Alabama is referring to. There's a movement afoot. It happened when the Pledge of Allegiance changed from one nation, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, to one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, right? And to put on the money, in God we trust, right? I don't think in God we trust was always on our currency. So yeah, the founding fathers of America were all knowledgeable about the Bible. Did they all go to services on Sunday morning? I don't know. Was church well attended in Philadelphia in 1776 that summer while the Declaration of Independence was being written? I don't know. But certainly the founding fathers wanted America to be home for all people, a haven for all people, and did not want America to be a Christian homeland. Okay, even though they may have been Christian themselves, or they were Christian themselves, they didn't want, and they saw the value of maintaining a separation between church and state. Okay, so this issue of embryos being children is not just a scientific issue and a threat to science being a determinant of law, which it should be, um, but it's also a threat to non-Christians in America, and even Christians who don't want to follow Christian law to determine their own lifestyle. Right, there are plenty of Christians. Right, John F. Kennedy faced these questions when he ran for president in 1960. Would his Catholicism affect his ability to be president of the United States, to be a president for all people? Joe Biden faced those same questions as a Catholic in 2020. Okay, so these are questions that are still being asked today, and the influence of the far right in the Republican Party and in America today in general on politics is frightening. Okay, so that's as far as I'll go with a political perspective here, but it goes against the Jewish perspective on what an embryo is, and that there should be an understanding that there are a number of opinions about what an embryo is and how it should be treated, and that all those opinions should be respected, and that one opinion shouldn't be the opinion that everybody has to follow, and it shouldn't become the law of the land. So, any questions or comments about this? Bob?
Well, sort of related, but I thought the percentage of population that are going to regular religious services across this country, and I think across the world, is dropping.
Yes, that's true.
So I think what you have is you got a very fringe, be polite, individual. I'm not going to use the term I was going to describe, making this decision. And most people that have any sense have already come out and said, no, this is a bad decision. I'm talking about the Republicans.
Okay, I understood. And right. So, but the fact is, it's still the law of Alabama right now until somehow it gets resolved, if it will get resolved. So yes, it's a fringe opinion now, but what I'm saying is that it doesn't represent something fringe. It represents a growing movement. And just because people aren't going to church anymore doesn't mean that they don't still subscribe to a very right-wing view of morality.
Yeah.
Okay, Perry.
I have two comments. Although I'm retired, occasionally I do tax returns, and I'm gonna have to ask people if they have any frozen embryos, because I'm gonna have to claim independency exemptions for them,
Right.
particularly if they live
In Alabama, right?
And I'm just wondering, two other things. I'm just wondering whether they issued this opinion while they were handling serpents. The interesting thing is, for some reason, I was cleaning off my desk, and before this opinion was issued, I said, aha, here's a document I want to reread. And right before the opinion came out, I reread an article I got from you on the Jewish position on abortion. And it's so contra.
Right.
It's scary.
Yeah, no, it is. It is very frightening what is going on in this country. And look, there are moments when I think, wow, what will happen in November this year with the election, and what will that mean? Is it really safe to live in America anymore? I think that sometimes. I don't think it all the time, but there are a lot of people who think that way because of not just about this kind of decision that came down from Alabama, and not just the reversal of Roe v. Wade last year, and but it's also nothing being done about gun control. No, the other elements that could change about society if the wrong person gets elected in November. uh, that's as far as I'll go with that. But it is frightening what has happened the past several years in our country to civil discourse. That's the main thing, that there is no such thing as civil discourse in our country anymore. People don't the default is to argue with somebody and to discount what somebody else says before even listening to it and having a healthy, respectful exchange of ideas and opinions. That just does not happen anymore. And when we think college campus should be the place that should be where that kind of debate happens, there are certain college campuses about certain topics where there is no healthy, intelligent, open debate. So it is frightening what is happening. And so even though, we all look down on Alabama and Mississippi, it can be a bellwether for what could happen like it could be the beginning of a trend in other states as well. And that is a frightening thing. And what's also frightening to me is that there doesn't seem to be somebody my age, right? Even my age, 62, is a bit old to start running for president, but nobody in their 40s who's really a prominent person in politics today who you could see is that should be the leader of that particular party. So that's frightening too, that the nature of politics today in America has led some people, or maybe even a lot of people, to be turned away from the whole political process. So there's a lot of dangerous things happening in our society as we speak. But the bottom line for today is embryos are cells, and that an embryo is not viable, not at all viable life. It only becomes a fetus when implanted in the uterus and sticks and grows. Then it's a fetus, and even then it's not viable life either, according to Jewish law. Okay, so we'll stop here for today. Hope everybody has a good rest of the day, and take care all.